We were expecting to come in today and talk about the third day of the shutdown of government, but instead we have something else, something that might be worse. A deal has apparently been reached between Republicans and most, but not all, of the Democrats in the Senate, and most recently, right before we went live, in the House as well. And so both Chuck Schumer, who was instrumental in this, and also Mitch McConnell had statements. Mitch McConnell said this: I hope and intend that we can reach bipartisan solutions on issues such as military spending, immigration, and border security and disaster relief before the February 8th deadline, this new deadline they're setting up. They're gonna fund the government until then. And he says, should these issues not be resolved by the time the funding bill before us expires, so long as the government remains open, it would be my intention to take up legislation here in the Senate that would address DACA, border security, and related issues. He further promised that the future immigration debate would have a level playing field where senators from both parties could offer amendments, which certainly would be something new in the Senate these days. And so Chuck Schumer is getting a lot of heat over this. He was enthusiastic, and I know that some people, like I was listening to Angus King, excited about the possibility that this could work out in the long run, but a lot of people incredibly critical, because one of the most important pillars of this is that you need to sort of trust Mitch McConnell, a guy who on face alone you shouldn't trust, and certainly on past recent experience you shouldn't. Like, talk to Susan Collins about how much you should trust Mitch McConnell, and we're being asked to trust him.
Yeah, McConnell promised last year for votes on healthcare where the Democrats would be allowed to do amendments, and immigration. Still waiting.
Yeah.
Look, the minute somebody says Mitch McConnell promised, the correct answer is an LOL. Not like, oh, well, Mitch is promising it. Well, golly gee willikers, that'll probably come to fruition. So now, having said that, this deal has upsides and downsides.
Yes.
You might be surprised to hear that from me, because I'm always yelling at the Democrats to toughen up and not take constant compromises. And there is a lot of that in this deal, but there's also some upsides too. So I want to give you guys both points of view. I'm going to let John continue here, and then we'll break down why it makes sense and why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, good point. As I was saying, a lot of people are worried about the prospect that Mitch McConnell's word is going to be sort of the important part in this. And a number of the senators who voted against this, predominantly Democrats, although there were a couple of Republicans, put out statements, a lot of them sort of echoing this. Now, one, as an example, is Kamala Harris, who said, the majority leader's comments fell far short of the ironclad guarantee I needed to support a stopgap spending bill. I refuse to put the lives of nearly 700,000 young people, referring to the DACA program there, in the hands of someone who's repeatedly gone back on his word. And you can find similar quotes like that from a number of different senators. And we want to show you the list of those who did actually vote no on this. This is the first set right here. And if you briefly glance over this, you're going to see some standouts that you might not have expected there. But then also some that, if you're looking ahead to 2020, it sort of makes sense that someone would be there. A few. And if we go ahead, you'll see a few more there. Hey, Chris Murphy, nice. Yeah. Okay. So and then you got like Mike Lee and Rand Paul as well, although probably not for the right reasons.
No. All right. So just a couple comments on that. Let's keep it real. First of all, any vote that is a progressive vote, I'll take under any circumstance. So I want to be clear about that. Now, are some of the 2020 candidates making sure that they're on the right side of the progressive base here? Of course.
And good.
Wonderful. And so there's real progressives on the list. There's people who are trying to please progressives that are on the list. And by the way, in Washington, that's frowned upon. They're like, oh, they had to vote that way. For which there's a lot of truth to that. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have voted that way, okay? And it's you guys making them vote that way. Good, put on more pressure. And the third part of that list is people who have primaries coming up. Dianne Feinstein. So Dianne Feinstein is one of the most conservative Democrats in the country. She voted for Bush's tax cuts when no one was paying attention. She voted to repeal the estate tax when no one was paying attention. She voted for the Iraq War. The list goes on and on. All of a sudden, she's in a primary. She's in California, where the DREAM Act is pretty relevant, and her primary opponents are putting heat on her. All of a sudden, she's like, no DREAM Act. Well, then I say no. Glad to see you woke up. Diane. But that's part of the motivation here. But again, all good votes, I'll take them, bless their hearts.
And by the way, it's enough to make you think that we should have more of these primaries. That maybe long term it's a good thing for the party.
Gee, I wonder if that's
Weird.
how politics works.
Yeah, okay, so before we get into some of the nitty gritty of what Chuck Schumer was able to get and some of what he really was not and might not have been concerned enough about, Donald Trump put out a statement saying, I am pleased that, get ready for the spin on this. I am pleased that Democrats in Congress have come to their senses and are now willing to fund our great military, border patrol, first responders, and insurance for vulnerable children, because they were against that before. As I've always said, once the government is funded, my administration will work towards, and this is important, solving the problem of very unfair illegal immigration. We'll make a long-term deal on immigration if and only if it's good for our country. So if you believe that the upcoming compromise deal that's going to be negotiated, remember this is coming from a president who said, whatever you guys give me, I will sign. We covered that like 2 weeks ago. He now spins it. The entire discussion is about how unfair illegal immigration is. So that's a good sign for the future right there. And by the way, we've had a couple of shutdowns like this. So as in 2013, when the Democrats put out a separate bill before the shutdown to make sure that members of the military got paid during the shutdown, which didn't necessarily need to be the way that it happened. They tried to do the same thing here, but the Republicans wouldn't allow it. And now they're spinning it as the Democrats trying to stop members of the military from being paid. But let's talk about what's actually in this. So we got a continuing resolution that funds the government for 3 weeks, which is definitely how the most powerful and influential country in the world should continue to function, being funded in 3-week increments. If we don't have a deal on DACA and some of the related issues in the meantime, then Mitch McConnell says that he will bring it up for a vote on the Senate, although we don't know what that bill that will be brought up will be, and Paul Ryan isn't bound to do anything in the House. And we don't know if Trump is or is not going to be involved in that debate or what his position might be. I don't think he knows what his position will be. The plus side, I guess at least, is that in no part of the deal did they make any, did they give away the wall funding or changes for legal immigration or anything like that. And the plus side, the one good thing, is that they did get 6 years of funding for CHIP. So we've been waiting months and months for this. I have people in my life that their kids are on CHIP and are worried that they're going to be thrown off their insurance. Well, now we don't have to get it funded 1 month at a time or anything like that. 6 years of funding, which is significant.
Yeah, it is significant. So look, I know a lot of progressives are upset about it, and as usual, Democrats didn't include the DREAM Act. I'm not. I guess part of the reason why I'm not as upset as some other people is because I'm not remotely surprised. I think a lot of people have a lot more hope than I do. They're like, no, I really think Chuck Schumer is going to deliver. Good luck with that. Okay, but to be fair to Chuck Schumer and the other negotiators here, it is only a 3-week extension, and at least CHIP is off the table. Now, I'm not unaware of how we got here. Back in September, the Republicans took 2 hostages. One was CHIP. It was bipartisan since its creation in 1997. In fact, one of its creators is Orrin Hatch, of all people.
Really?
Yes. Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch. And CHIP has been enormously successful. Given now children on CHIP have as good insurance, if not better, than the private market. And it has reduced sickness among children. It's a wonderful example of government success. That is now why the Republicans turn around and go, we must think about killing it, right? Including Orrin Hatch. So now the times have gotten much more vicious. So, and whether they wanted to kill it or not, ultimately, this is the beginning of that process. The more important thing short term was, well, take it hostage so that when you give it back to the Democrats a couple of months later, they'll give you the whole budget, right? And the other hostage they took was DACA. So Trump said, well, that's it. We're not protecting the Dreamers anymore. He made that decision unilaterally. And since September, those 2 things that were bipartisan and were approved all along for all these years, all of a sudden became a part of the negotiation. So now the Democrats are fighting like hell to try to get back to the status quo of September of 2017, when Trump was already in charge. And this is how the Republicans play the game. They take one hostage after another. And children might lose their health insurance. This is the Republican caucus reaction to that. Wait, is it donor children? No, then who? So they don't care, that's why they take Dreamers. Young kids who are doing well in America, who don't even know what country they came from. They don't know anybody. What are the Republicans care? They don't care about that at all. So that's why they don't mind taking hostages, whereas a lot of Democrats do mind the hostages. That's why the Republicans keep taking them.
Yeah.
Now, the way that it's supposed to work is that the minute they take the hostage, Democrats should go on the warpath and go, look at these monsters who just ended this insurance program for kids. Look at how successful it was. And they should put little kids that have CHIP, that are no longer going to get health insurance and that might die. They should, instead, Democrats do nothing. Please give it back to us. Now, I'm actually a little excited we got CHIP back, okay? And for just a 3-week extension. We got half the hostages back. Unfortunately, in this day and age, that's about as good as Democratic leadership can do.
Yeah, so look, overall, after like spending the day getting updates on this and finding out, is it actually gonna pass? Because originally the White House was against it and then they were for it. Now it looks like it passed the House, it will actually go to him. I hate the hot takes. I hate the uninformed, knee-jerk hot takes. There were people who were gonna declare victory when they saw it, regardless of the details. There were people who were gonna damn it, regardless of the details. They're not interested. But when you actually absorb it, I think these pluses are good, but I think that the deal looks bad and is bad, which are different things, but both of them are bad. I don't think that they should have done this, even though there are some good things in here. I think that Chuck Schumer and some of the other Democrats either had so little respect for their own ability to force something better or just fear that an ongoing shutdown would make them look bad, that they felt the need to blink. And I don't think it was gonna make them look bad. I think that they could have held out for longer. And I mean, look, best case scenario mixed in with worst case scenario. So I guess sort of regular scenario, in 3 weeks, we might get DACA, or in less than 3 weeks, that's possible. We really have to wait and find out. Anyone who says they know for sure in a month where we're gonna be is lying to you because nobody actually knows. Donald Trump doesn't know, Chuck Schumer doesn't know. And so we have to see. This could have been worse, but it could have been a hell of a lot better. And I think that this is the sort of thing that Chuck Schumer and the other Democrats in the leadership doing doesn't just hurt them now, but it is a lingering hurt because whether it is in 3 weeks a betrayal, it damn sure looks like a betrayal right now.
So, and I want to be clear about this. As I just told you, I think it's the best that Democratic leadership can do. It is not the best we can get, not even miles from that, okay? So in terms of what they should have done, I agree with John. Look, DACA polls anywhere between 70 to 84%, depending on the poll that you're looking at. Right now, there's a 20-point gap on who people would blame. They would blame the Republicans and Donald Trump. So you literally cannot ask for a better situation than that politically. One of the excuses Democrats used was, but we have a 14-point lead going into the 2018 elections on generic congressional ballots. No, that's not a but, that's an and. So, because when they're down, I've been covering it for over 20 years. The Democrats go, but we can't because we're down in the polls and this will make us look bad. So wait, if you're down in the polls, you can't fight. If you're up in the polls, you can't fight. So when do you fight? And the answer with Democratic leadership is almost always never, never. So resistance, in their case apparently, is futile. So it is tiny, microscopic resistance.
Yeah.
So the correct thing to do would be, I don't think you heard us. Donald Trump likes to shout. Okay, we can shout back, but we didn't stutter. No DREAM Act, no budget. We're done. Until that's the conversation we're having, we're not going back to the table. So you can go scream all you want. You can call other countries and other people any name you like, but we're not, there's no deal because we actually fight for our voters. How would that be? Or we fight for Americans, we fight for our side. How great would that be? But the Democrats never have that courage because they view their constituents as not their voters, but their donors. So why does Chuck Schumer actually panic? He's on the phone 4 to 5 hours a day raising money. Almost everyone he's on the phone with is a millionaire. Almost all of them have a lot of money in the stock market. Almost all of them are probably telling Chuck, hey Chuck, wrap this thing up, man. If this hurts the markets, it hurts me, which hurts you. Wrap it up already. If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join.